Hello and welcome back to your paper Zeitgeist Readings on Literature and Culture. In this video, we are going to learn about the poem Refugee Blues, written by W. H. Auden. W. H. Auden was born in 1907 and he died in 1973. His full name was Wystan Hugh Auden. Auden was born in York, Britain, and was educated in Oxford. He is considered to be one of the finest poets of the 20th century, occupying a position among the likes of T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. He was remarkably prolific and experimental in his poetry. In 1930, Auden's first collection of poetry entitled Poems was published and it inaugurated the movement of English verse known as the Auden generation. The other members included Stephen Spender, Louis MacNeice, and Cecil DeLuise. The frequent change of political stance, coupled with the versatile forms and themes, make Auden unclassifiable in the latter phase. His early stage was characterized by an Eliot-like modernism. His middle stage incorporated Marxist and Freudian themes, and his late stage was more conversational and dealt with Christianity. But a concern for the rights of the various marginalized individuals and communities remained his principal theme. In 1939 he had moved to United States to live there and in 1956 he came back to England. In 1973 he died of a heart attack in Vienna. Auden's important works include the poem Spain, in memory of W. B. Yeats, September 1, 1939, Musée des Beaux-Arts, which is a French title which means Museum of Fine Arts, The Unknown Citizen, New Year Letter, The Shield of Achilles. Now let's move on to the poem. In 1937, Auden had married Erika Mann, daughter of the famous German novelist Thomas Mann, only to secure her a British passport and thereby save her from Hitler's Germany. This might have influenced him to sympathize for the Jewish refugees. The poem Refugee Blues was published in 1939 on the eve of Britain's entry into World War II, but its focus is on non-military aspects of the era's political conflicts. The poem is written from the perspective of a Jewish refugee fleeing Nazi Germany. The poem meditates on the plight of Jewish refugees in general, forced to flee Nazi Germany but unable to find refuge elsewhere. As the poem does so, it raises broader questions about isolation, loneliness, and exile. It depicts the trauma and pain of being forced to leave home and of being unable to find a place of safety and security in a violent and uncertain world. As the title indicates, it's a blues poem, a form rooted in African American music and literature. Like most blues poems, it expresses emotions of sadness and despair through a musical note. The first two lines of each stanza not only rhyme but also contain similar or complementary information, while the final line of each stanza does not rhyme with the previous two and has contradictory juxtaposed content. This is a slight divergence from the traditional Blues poem in which the first two lines of each stanza are not merely linked but are near identical. Though Refugee Blues is written in the first person, the speaker addresses a you throughout, often using a phrase my dear and the pronoun we. Thus, the poem is framed simultaneously as a critique of the treatment of refugee as a whole and as an intimate conversation between two individuals. Refugee Blues can be categorized as a poem of witness, though this term was popularized decades after its publication. Poetry of witness describes the addresses wider social and historical issues such as war, genocide, and discrimination. Here, Auden takes on the role of witness, using his platform as a widely read poet to advocate for more humane treatment of refugees. The poem addresses the indifference and antagonism the refugees faced when seeking asylum in the democracies of the period. This poem was written in 1939, as we have already mentioned, before the Jewish state of Israel was found after the Second World War. Ironically, the founding of Israel actually created a number of refugees in the world. Now let's move on to the lines of the poems. In the first stanza, it starts like this. Say this city has 10 million souls. Some are living in mansions, some are living in holes. Yet there is no place for us, my dear. Yet there is no place for us. Let's say there are 10 million people in this city. Some are living in mansions, some are living in slums. The word hole refers to shacks or small houses. But there is nowhere for us to live, my dear. There is nowhere for us to live. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Look in the atlas and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear. We cannot go there now. So these refugees were expelled from the countries where they lived, Germany and other European countries. We used to belong to a nation and we thought it was beautiful. If you look in the atlas, you will see it. But we can't go there anymore, my dear. We can't go there anymore. In the village churchyard, there grows an old yew. Every spring it blossoms anew. Old passports can't do that, my dear. Old passports can't do that. An old yew tree grows outside the village church. Every spring it blossoms again. But our old passports don't blossom in spring, my dear. They don't blossom in the spring. Yew is a coniferous tree and it is actually referred to here to show the difference between nature and culture. In nature, there is a scope for revival. Once you lose something, it may get revived. But in the case of culture, in real world, in human society, once you lose your identity, it's very difficult for you to get it back. Your passport actually represents your identity, your position in this world. The consul banged the table and said, if you have got no passport, you are officially dead. But we are still alive, my dear, but we are still alive. The immigration official slammed his fist down on the table and shouted, if you don't have a passport, then you are legally dead. But we are still living, my dear. We are still living. So, this refers to the plight of the refugees. Often we hear about how refugees find it difficult to prove that they are alive, or rather, they need to have their papers to prove their existence. So if you have lost your passport, you are officially dead. That's what the consul tells the refugees. And the person laments that even though we are physically alive, we are legally dead. Went to a committee. They offered me a chair, asked me politely to return next year. But where shall we go today, my dear? But where shall we go today? I went to a committee for help, and they told me to take a seat, then told me to wait until next year. But where will we go right now, my dear? Where will we go right now? As we often say, justice delayed is justice denied. These people are offered some position, or the word chair may often refer to a position, but when they are not given it right away, when they are given it after 1 year or so, what is going to happen to them during that period? Nobody is bothered about their present position. Came to a public meeting. The speaker got up and said, "If we let them in, they will steal our daily bread." He was talking of you and me, my dear. He was talking of you and me. I went to a political rally where the speaker said, "If we let the refugees enter our country, they'll take our food." He was talking about you and me, my dear. He was talking about you and me. We often listen to the references to refugees all over the world. So, usually, there is a divide in the way people look at these refugees, or refugees are often expelled from their places based on their belief, their ethnicity, etc. So, there is a rivalry which is usually made use of by the politicians. These politicians divide people, talking about these uh, ethnic identity or religious identity of these people, and telling that if we give them space in our country, they will take away our material uh, provisions. We will lose our provisions once they come and share ours. That's one thing that we often see, how countries shut their borders before refugees, how refugees are waiting to get asylum in countries. So, politicians make use of this opportunity to divide people, to create a kind of insecurity among the host community, to make them deny entry for these refugee people. We'll continue with the rest of the poem in the next video. Thank you.